All right, so we also have joined by Abrar Hussein, former ambassador. So thank you very much for joining us on Indus News. I'm sure you know how the situation is evolving in Afghanistan right now. We're talking about Russia, about how it's not evacuating its diplomats. But just before we jump on to Russia, how do you see the situation developing, and do you see a peaceful negotiation between the Taliban and the Kabul government?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Hello?
Yes, sir, please. Yes.
Taliban have said it time and again that they will not take over Kabul by force. And recently there are reports that negotiations are being held inside Kabul presidential palace. And it has been agreed that Taliban will not attack Kabul and take it by force. And they are all waiting for a peaceful negotiated settlement and a peaceful transition. So, and there are reports that perhaps some acting president is being nominated. So let's hope for the better and for a peaceful transition.
Right, we all hope for a peaceful transition. But sir, let's see if, for example, let's take the chances. If the Kabul government denies Taliban's offer of a peaceful transition, what do you think will happen next?
I don't think at this stage any such denial can come from Kabul government. You know, the Kabul government is not in a position to deny many favors or even this negotiated settlement. Kabul is surrounded all around. The Taliban have marched towards Kabul from all four sides, and they've stopped there just before Kabul city. And what they are now saying is that they have asked their fighters not to attack Kabul and remain peaceful. And they are waiting for a negotiated settlement now.
Right, Mr. Hussein, tell us now, obviously you've been a former ambassador to Afghanistan. Now, please explain to us the situation, for example, if the situation worsens in Afghanistan and there arises an influx of Afghans approaching Pakistan, obviously for security reasons, what is going to be Pakistan's response? And is there going to be a situation like this rising in the near future?
Well, I think this time, if the refugees come, the number would be much less, not the same as was the case last time. Because this time, number one, Taliban have already taken over almost all the provinces in Afghanistan. It's only Kabul and just maybe a few insignificant cities which are with the Kabul government. And number two, Taliban have taken over all the border cities, all the border crossing points, including Torkham and Spin Boldak. So we have very little chances that more refugees would be coming to Pakistan. And in such a case, even if there are some refugees coming in, I hope we have already planned for that, and we should be mentally ready to receive at least a few 100,000 refugees, maximum.
Right, now let's talk about Russia. Obviously, I'm sure you're aware that Russia is not evacuating its diplomats, and that might be a support or a level of trust that Russia has on the Taliban and the future government of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And just to add on this, the latest is that Russia is saying that an emergency United Nations meeting on Afghanistan is planned. And if I read out, Russia is working with other countries to hold an emergency United Nations Security Council meeting on Afghanistan as the Taliban is near to completing its military takeover of the country. What can we expect from the United Nations Security Council, sir?
Well, I think the United Nations Security Council could maximum ask for a negotiated settlement. They can ask for a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire, and they can ask both parties to stop violence.
Right, but obviously the Taliban has already stated this, that they are not going to take over Kabul with violence, and they are hoping for a peaceful negotiation with the Kabul government. And also rumors are there that Ashraf Ghani has already fled the country, but they are not confirmed yet. So how do you see these things happening? Obviously Russia is in support of Taliban in Afghanistan, and obviously we cannot rule out another country, which is the United States, and it has a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council.
Number one, you are saying that why Russia has not withdrawn from Kabul, which means their diplomats are still there, their embassy is still there. I think all the regional countries who were not part of the fight, who were not allies of the United States like NATO and the European countries, don't feel any threat from Taliban, because they were not party in that war against Taliban, or say a war that was going on in Afghanistan. So the regional countries, except India, don't have any fears. They are not afraid of Taliban. And India, because he was siding with the Afghan government, because he was supporting Afghan government, he was sending his planes full of weapons to help Afghan government. So that's why they are afraid, and that's why they withdrew all their diplomats from Afghanistan. But coming to UN Security Council, yes, Americans are already aware of what's happening. They are already in contact with Taliban, and I don't think so that UN Security Council will issue some very harsh resolution against Taliban. The maximum they can say is that there should be peace, there should not be violence, there should be negotiated settlement, blah, blah, blah.
Right, now just to add latest information that is coming from Afghanistan, according to our sources, that the negotiations are ongoing at the presidential palace right now, and the Afghan government, according to our sources, is ready to resign and is also ready for a peaceful negotiation with the Taliban. And as for our resources say that Abdul Ghani brother is already in Kabul. This is just to add, and obviously as the Kabul government, according to our sources, is ready to resign. Now, for example, if the Taliban is coming into power, and we understand that the Taliban is not going to accept any XYZ interim government or president to lead them and to for the transition phase. Now, the United Nations Security Council comes in very handy at this place. And as you said, former ambassador, the United States is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and obviously they were in war with the Taliban, so we can expect some harsh rules and statements coming out from the UNSC meeting today. What do you think?
Well, yes, US is a permanent member. A permanent member can veto a resolution, but then it cannot impose a resolution on Security Council because there are other permanent members as well. And there are other non-permanent members there. So let's see what the majority says. I mean, if the U.S. Does not agree with that resolution, they can always veto it. But then they cannot impose a resolution of their own.
Right, so also now let's talk about recognition of Taliban as a government in Afghanistan. A few weeks back, England had already stated that they are willing to work with the Taliban in power. Obviously, when the Taliban takes over Afghanistan and when the Taliban do come into power, there is going to be a need of recognition by the international community.
Yes, of course. I mean, although Pakistan and the US and some others said that if Kabul is taken over by power, they will not recognize it. And you have quoted the British statement also, that they would be willing to work with the Taliban government. Well, it all depends on the attitude of Taliban now. I mean, how harsh are their policies? how they take over Kabul, whether it's by violence, through war, or through negotiated settlement, and how do they impose their new laws in Afghanistan. So it all depends on how they work in their new government.